Okay, let's talk about the other at least the other major college basketball team in Indiana. IU. They just lost a game last night to Northwestern. It was an interesting watch. The question is, can they bounce back against Maryland on national television on Sunday? It's a very similar framework to the question we asked about Purdue, right? Both teams play on national television this weekend. Purdue is on Fox on Friday night. On Sunday in the early afternoon on CBS is when IU takes on Maryland. So overall, right, IU just lost to Northwestern on the road, 79-70 last night. They are now 14-6, 5-4 in the Big Ten. That puts them at 7th or 8th, middle of the pack there. They lost to Northwestern last night. Let's talk about that loss first, because there's some thoughts that I have there, and then we'll preview the Maryland game. IU lost 79-70 in this game, and there's really two reasons for this loss, in my opinion. The first one, number one, and if you watch this game, you very well notice this, is poor perimeter defense from the Hoosiers. Tyberry off the bench hit 7 threes. He scored 23 points total. Leach had 3 triples as well. The team, Northwestern, shot 48% from 3, primarily to me because of IU's lapses on defense. And the reason why this is so concerning is because Northwestern's not a good shooting team. They don't shoot well from the field. They don't shoot well from 3. This is not their identity. They've been losing games because they can't hit open shots. And Northwestern just had far too much space to shoot, and it's props to them for creating that space and giving Tyberry, creating space for him around the three-point line to get some shots up. But across the board, Northwestern, again, had way too much space to shoot. The main mismatch was Tyberry and Mackenzie Mbako, where Northwestern was scheming Tyberry open, and Mackenzie Mbako was just fooled by that, or at least beat by that, every single time. And every single time you would see Tyberry pull up from 3, and he hits another one, ended up with 7 and 23 points. But the flip side of that is when Woodson and IU, this coaching staff, really realized that Mbako was getting fried by Tyberry around the perimeter, they bring in Anthony Leal, and still there's just not much of a fix. There wasn't much of a remedy for Tyberry around the perimeter, which is scary because Tyberry doesn't even start for the Wildcats, right? This is a Northwestern team that's bad. They were 2-5. I suppose they're now 3-5 in the Big Ten. They're turning things around, right? They nearly knocked off Michigan just the other day, but Northwestern, they've been playing well. This isn't a great team in the Big Ten, and IU really struggled to limit their shooters. Yes, Northwestern had a great game, but IU had a moment where they could have pulled away. They didn't really take advantage of the Wildcat cold stretch in the end of the first half. This game is played in quarters. It'd be the second quarter almost to a T. From 9:35 minutes left in the first half to the end of the first half, Northwestern didn't hit a field goal, right? They ended the half with just 25 points. That period of time in the second half of the first half, right, in that final 9 minutes of the first half, that should be when IU pulls away. And I don't mean to just compare IU and Purdue, but I think it's important to note, right, that if Purdue was in this situation, that's when they're pulling away and the game's over, right? Braden Smith is scoring, Trey Coffin-Redd is scoring, Fletcher Loyer is scoring. It doesn't matter. Somebody is scoring, and they're pulling away in that moment. And that's just not what happens. And at the end of the first half, the score was 31-25. But again, Northwestern had 25 at the end of the first half, and IU could not pull away. It was turnovers. It was poor shooting. They couldn't hit shots themselves. IU really didn't create separation between themselves and a theoretically inferior opponent. Factually, they just let Northwestern hang around, and Northwestern, of course, again, this is the Big Ten on the road. The home team in the Big Ten, eventually, this game's about scoring runs, and that team at home in the Big Ten is eventually going to have one, and they're eventually going to turn things around, and they're eventually going to get hot. Now, Northwestern got way hotter than any team IU has seen in conference play so far, outside of maybe Illinois, but Northwestern started to pop at home. The crowd got behind them. They had some wind in their sails, and sure, it's okay to maybe be beat in a couple minutes span when that run is occurring, but IU really couldn't stop those 14-2, 10-0 scoring runs from occurring. And again, it's an ebb and a flow. IU is going to have a 10-0 scoring run, and they did in the second half, but none of that should have been necessary because they should have been in a position where at the end of the first half, in that final 9 minutes, they're pulling away and go into halftime leading by 20 because Northwestern only has 25 points in the game across the board and hadn't scored a field goal in almost half of the first half. They let Northwestern hang around, and look what happened. It's a 9-point loss as they get hot in the second half. And what would it be? If they scored 73, then if they scored 79, actually, then it would be, I'm quick math, but like 20, 54, something like that points, 50 points in the second half. Yeah, they scored 25 in the first. That should be when IU leads by 20, and sure, maybe Northwestern pops in the second half, but it shouldn't be enough for them to beat IU. And IU, again, just let them hang around, and that was a problem to me, and that is something that we worried about at the beginning of the season, where you have games against teams like UNC Greensboro or Sam Houston, and IU at home in Assembly Hall isn't putting these teams away quick enough. And they beat UNC Greensboro by around 10, right? Just around double digits, 11, 9, whatever it was. That's just not enough. They have to be putting those inferior opponents away quicker. And we talked about at that time how that might be an issue in the future. And look where we are now. Northwestern, much better than UNC Greensboro, but still an inferior opponent in the Big Ten. Sure, you're on the road, but if Northwestern is shooting that poorly in the first half, and they're, again, not that impressive of a basketball team on most nights, if they're shooting that poorly, that's when Indiana needs to pull away and put them away. And they just didn't do either of those things. Northwestern hangs around. They're at home. Second half, it's a new game, down by 6. They get hot, and next thing you know, it's game over, and the Wildcats have won. So it's a great win for Northwestern, but a very unfortunate turn of events this season for the Hoosiers. A few bright spots from the game. We're starting to see some consistency. Amar Ballo remains consistent down low. He's been the number one most consistent player on the season for the Hoosiers. He had 15 points, 7 rebounds, and 7 assists last night. Great numbers from him down low once again. Luke Goody now has strung together a pair of strong showings. He played well against Ohio State, that overtime win, and 14 points in this game against Northwestern, 5 for 8 from the field, 4 for 5 from 3. Theoretically, this means we have one in the backcourt and one in the front court. Amar Ballo in the front court dominating, Luke Goody in the backcourt dominated. Malik Renaud is back, so maybe that relieves some pressure off of Luke Goody eventually. But really, IU has struggled to find a shooter in the backcourt that can really take over games. And Luke Goody certainly kept IU in this one. I think without a few of those clutch threes, he ended up having 4 of them. IU is not going to be in the same position to beat Northwestern. One in the backcourt, that's Luke Goody. One in the front court, definitely, that's Amar Ballo. Those are the bright spots that I saw from a consistency perspective, where now 2 games in a row at least, both of these players are performing well. Like I said, Malik Renaud is back. He didn't play much as they work him back into the lineup. He played for 10 minutes. He had 2 points, so he showed up, right? And that jersey number showed up in this game, and that was encouraging enough and a good sign to me for sure. Maybe this game goes differently if he is a starter and fully playing, but we're working him back in after that right knee injury, which is, of course, a very significant injury. I honestly was surprised when I saw him. I didn't know he would be back. I didn't know he would be back this early, especially when that injury occurred. But Renaud is in a position now where they're working him back into the lineup, and IU has a very, very tough stretch of games coming up. They play Maryland, Purdue, and then 3 more ranked opponents all in a row. It's a difficult stretch of the schedule for IU. They're going to need them to be at full strength. We'll see how working Renaud back into the lineup changes things for the Hoosiers across the board. A tough loss against Northwestern, but a loss nonetheless. The Maryland game is coming up Sunday at noon on CBS in Assembly Hall. Yet another national TV Hoosiers basketball game. This one happening at Assembly Hall. Maryland's recently is coming off a narrow win over Nebraska and an overtime loss to Northwestern. So Northwestern has been in some real close games recently, right? And we've talked about them a couple times here. They beat Maryland in overtime. They lose to Michigan in overtime. And then they, of course, win this close one against IU. Northwestern, a plucky, likable team, in my opinion, in the Big Ten. Maryland's going to play number 17 Illinois tonight on the road. So before they play IU, they still have another game in between when we'll speak again. Number 17 Illinois tonight on the road. We'll see how that game goes. That will certainly dictate in some ways what this game looks like on Sunday. But this Maryland team is 14-5, 4-4, 8th in Big Ten play. Very similar to the Hoosiers optically. They're a good team. They have good players across the floor. This is a winnable game for the Hoosiers, all right? This is an opponent in your range of the Big Ten standings that you catch at home. So this should be a redemption opportunity for the Hoosiers because, again, this is a team similar to your level in the Big Ten standings, and we'll see how Maryland and Indiana's seasons turn out and how things shake out at the end of the year. But right now it appears, optically, that Maryland's a team about similar to your level. They have good players across the floor. IU is at least trying to have good players across the floor. At home, this is a winnable game, and I hope that IU is capable of coming away from this one with a win. This would be a fantastic position to have redemption for the Hoosiers, and I'm very interested to see if that's what actually occurs. Again, this IU team, 5-4 in the Big Ten. They're, 14-6 overall. They've been losing, right? They have that overtime win over Ohio State, but they haven't won in regulation in a while. The loss to Illinois was horrific. The loss to Northwestern last night was very deflating as well. They'll get another chance against Maryland this Sunday on national television. Can they bounce back? Will they bounce back? That is the question that we have to ask. We will talk about that game after it happens. We'll talk about it on Monday morning. This is an opportunity for IU to redeem themselves. Otherwise, this season very well could be falling completely by the wayside as we watch them fall to the NIT and potentially even below that. These are must-win games that this bubble team is going to want to make the tournament. It's a weak season for IU. It's a questionable period of time for this fan base, this coaching staff, this roster. But this game against Maryland is a prime opportunity for redemption.